welcome everybody to another episode of the Monitor Keeping Podcast. Just me and Khai today, and I'm coming to you from my bed where I'm flat on my back, nursing a broken something or another, my pride for one, and my back is totally out, so might as well make the most of it and get another episode in.
Explain to them how you hurt your back. I shouldn't be laughing because this has happened to me, but many of us can relate.
So sorry if it sounds funny too. I can't hook up the regular microphone and headset because it is too hard to move around. That being said, so I was in the shower. I was singing away, having myself a good time. This was on Thursday, so it's Saturday now, and this was Thursday morning, and I've got big plans for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to do a ton of work at the warehouse. So I'm gearing up for a great week, get the things done I want to get done. So I'm singing away in the shower, and I sneezed. And that was it, man. One sneeze dropped me to the floor. I had to crawl out of the shower. And I've been hunched over ever since. Man. And I think I've been to the chiropractor twice. Now, I tried to go today, but they were closed. That was a big waste. So much effort to get over there, and the doors were locked. I about cried.
Yeah, I've gone through the same thing, man. During a large cage move, I ended up in the same thing in the shower and kind of coughed, sneezing, and pulled my left I guess it's that sciatic nerve area. And it's the one that leads all the way down your butt, down your leg. And you can kind of feel the strings as you lean your left, turn your head to the right and left. You can feel it pull.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If you turn your head to the right, it really pulls.
I have never been so afraid to cough or sneeze now in my life.
Yeah, same. I try to take it easy. But man, sometimes allergies gets you and you just let it go. And I just hope that, it doesn't have me hunch over. But, I think a lot of us real like hardcore monitor keepers where, we have a ton of soil. The cages are huge. The logs are heavy. Everything is heavy. You're loading buckets of water, and honestly, you're not always going to be lifting with your knees. You're just going to be lifting, And so you got to bend over in short cages and awkward positions, and have yourself working at your whole body bent at a 90-degree angle. These are all the things that we're guilty of doing, and it just puts our body at a.
It's absolutely true. In fact, I think cage design going into the future is going to be somewhat based on somewhat based on, hey, I got to take care of my body, because the truth is, if you don't take care of yourself and you want to keep monitors, man, it can be hard if you're not physically able with some of these guys, especially the bigger guys that require a lot.
You'll push stuff back and things will happen, and you'll say, I can get to it another time, or when you feel better or whatever. For me, the thought of it, I write it down on a piece of paper and bang it out that week. That's what I try to do. For anybody that, you may suffer, because not all of us are all healthy. Some of us suffer from things. I have asthma, and I push myself to the limit every day. Whenever I'm feeling really asthmatic and really wheezy and I just can't do a whole lot, I'll do it in spurts. I'll go and put on the mask, of course, and not get all dusty. And if I do, I just stop, go get some fresh air, and then come back to it in a little bit. That's the cool part about having your own stuff, and you're not working for somebody where you gotta immediately do stuff. You can come back to it in an hour, or do some stuff, get some rest, do some stuff, get some rest, and hopefully you get it done, and without having to bombard you with so much work. Because when I was keeping like water monitors or really large monitors, and man, luckily I was a lot younger and dumber then. Um, but like now it's like, okay, I gotta be, like Alan said, I gotta be pretty strategic with what I'm keeping, the amount of
Right.
everything, like even the amount of soil. It's overdoing now that I have in full in floor nesting on some of the cages, right? So instead of having a bin that I can kind of lug around and lift up and out, right? That whole soil is there now. So it's not like I'm just gonna pick it all up, So I gotta
Right.
dig it all up, move it all into a bin, dig out another corner, find some, try to look for eggs or whatever, right? Or even just refurbishing the whole thing. Yeah,
Dude, it's
it can be some work, man.
it's absolutely crazy. It's because I in front of my warehouse right now. The day before, I went and picked, or 2 days before or so, I went and picked up like four of those large bags. They're like 85 liters compressed of peat moss, and then I think close to probably 600 pounds of sand. All those 50-pound bags. So that was what I was planning to do this weekend, was mix a bunch of dirt and
Yeah.
have it and all that's out the window.
Oh man. Shoot.
uh,
Yeah.
so, but the good news is, because of that, now we can record another episode because I'm laying here flat on my back. The other good news is, and something I want to touch on, was it came to my attention that there was a bunch of fake posts and scams using some of my pictures, some of my animals. Um, so with that, it's been on the back of my head or been in the back of my head to make a more official logo and a watermark type of deal, so that I can, make sure that, well,
Your
mark
pictures
my
are safe.
photos,
Yeah.
yeah, and hopefully protect some people out there.
Yeah.
Now that being said, guys, I'm sorry if you got scammed. Apparently, it was like several, like at least 10 people have reached out to me about it. Um, if someone's trying to sell you a stellar looking animal, female Aki, for $250, it's a scam. It's a straight scam. I
Yeah.
wouldn't sell those girls for anything less than probably,
800 to 1,000.
yeah, probably 1250 for those girls, because the truth is, you're not getting them out of me. So that would be, and you got to think about why. So if you see the market value for baby Ackies, and even if you were new to the market, you could say you charge somewhere between, $400 to $500. If you're new, people with more reputation may be able to charge more, that have more to show for their animals. So you
Yeah.
got to think an adult female,
And half a
and
klutz can make that money back.
right. And so if I have a female, or if someone has a female and it's a proven breeder or a known female, um, unless there's something seriously wrong with that animal, then you got to think, you're going to get 2 to 4, maybe 5 clutches out of that girl, average of 6 to 10, let's say 8 eggs. You just do the math. It doesn't make sense. None of that makes sense. So when something's too good to be true, it's too good to
Probably
be true.
not. Yeah.
Right. So I'm trying to help people get ahead of that too. One, always do your homework with who you're dealing with. It's, we deal in a world that we
Due
used to ask,
diligence.
what's
Yeah.
that?
Definitely go through due diligence with everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we used to ask for a lot of references, or references, just to get to know people and see if they're legit. That being said, in today's world, we also have social media that kind of acts as your reputation and your reference. So even though I've seen some guys, and I think we talked about it before, that totally cloned or copied somebody else's social media, there is that if they get real intricate with their scam. But for the most part, you should be able to not only go onto their social media pages, but contact them as well.
Yeah.
If they don't have that, if someone has some, stellar looking animals, and they're, I don't know how else to put it, but do your homework. Like,
Yeah.
just
There's like, for me, so I'm super paranoid, right? I basically don't buy through anybody unless we kind of already know them through the circle, right?
Right.
Um, and then even then, if you're still unsure about somebody, you ask another person about them.
Right.
They'll likely be sharing friends in common because that's just how people operate online nowadays, you know. And
Right.
so these are green flags, right? Where it's like, all right, you got a lot of people that you're friends with. You kind of have a reputation of, at least you don't have a bad reputation, right?
Right.
And so your name's not floating around there, or they're not posting you up, or some people aren't paying attention to this. So I guess it's where um, you're just kind of unknowing, more so of just unaware to how people are playing the game, right? And
Right.
cheating the game more so. um, and so you're asking people, you should be able to click their name in relative groups or enter their name in relative groups. And most people, even people like Frank Reitz, or I don't know, like they're not really majorly in the hobby as far as breeding monitors anymore, but you can still find their name and some type
Yep.
of something. And so you'll be able to, like, for me, if you look up my name, not even my page, but just my name through groups, you'll see for years of posts and posts and posts and things like that. And Alan too, you should be able to look up his name on groups and see his track record, his activity, things like that. If they don't have any of that and they're kind of just like a ghost with activity and they're just posting stuff for sale, that is also a red flag. um,
Right.
new profiles is what people are calling it, but some are a little bit more intricate than that now. People are really taking their time, kind of almost seeming like they are like they have a lot of friends that are in common. They may have been incognito for a little bit, and then all of a sudden they're posting stuff that you want. They may even converse a little bit, but for the most part, if you don't hear well stuff through typical names like John or Christopher or Alex. I mean, there's a lot of names that deal with monitors, but you'll hear about each other, and literally such a, although there's so many people, it's still a very tight knit circle.
Right.
Um, and
There's even one out there right now that's been long lasting where I talked to the guy because he reposted somebody else's animals, and I said, "Hey, I've seen that picture before. What's going on? Why are you posting for them?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just a partner of theirs." So I was like, "Okay." And so I went with it just to mess with him and see where he was going to go. And he was saying something like, "Okay, in order to buy these animals, you have to sign a contract with me."
yeah, wait,
Man,
was
that's
that was that
not.
was that Hilltop Tree or Hilltop Reptiles or something like that?
Let me see. I can look it up real quick. Has someone done that to you, or is this person legit?
No, this person has done it to another person basically, and then became very unresponsive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then basically started showing signs of this is possibly a scam. When people they take your money and they kind of just disappear. They're really unresponsive with stuff. I mean, not only is that kind of a dick move, right, for you to
Right.
basically ignore a person about their lizard that they pay for. It's technically theirs now, so they kind of have they have some obligation to that, right? And you're sort of in a way obligated to help them out, answer their questions and whatnot. And so, yeah, this person basically made another guy sign a contract, and whether or not that it was a scam or not, that the guy basically became unresponsive, and you try to be somewhat understanding about people's situation, but when it becomes so long of unresponse, and you basically you're talking to a wall. They look at your stuff but don't answer. Things like that. It's like
Right.
they're red flags.
Absolutely.
Whether or not they're a scam or not. It's just how people want you to act online, or how um, customer service works online now. Sometimes, so um, it's just being responsive, things like that.
So I hesitate to even say this person's name because I'm not sure if they are or not. Um, but it was a weird conversation. Um, I'm going to do my homework on this because I guess what I want to bring out is to everybody that might be listening. If you see a picture that you know belongs to somebody else and you see it pop up somewhere else, take an extra second to maybe call them out to protect people because we got to look out for each other here. And there's a lot of scammers out there, and that just gets
Every
under my
day there's more scammers, like
yeah,
every day. Blue trees, nice stuff, lace monitors, things that are almost impossible to get. Yeah, they're
right,
regularly. Um, it's like Indonesian people or people over there in the islands like that. It's people that are your locals that are,
right,
just some Joe Blow. They just decided to take your pictures and realize that, oh man, people will jump at this if I just post it up.
yeah,
Let me try to get a picture that's not really seen by everybody. But yeah, there's people that are really, they pay attention. People have signatures. Like most of my pictures are with them in my arm. You can see how my pictures are. The lighting and all that stuff is almost all the same in every picture. Uh,
right.
I don't have highly desired animals that much to be stolen like that, but people can. It can happen. I don't want to speak too soon for myself yet, but it's I haven't gotten there. I've made a logo and everything in preparation to kind of brand myself better, but never have I thought I needed it to look protect my stuff a little bit more, which it kind of does. It gives everybody uh, a location or where to find my logo and how to find me. It's like, all right, you just look for this. If it's this familiarity and what you see and everything like that, then it's him. Um,
Right.
yeah, so I haven't used the watermarks yet, but I'm thinking about it. I just don't want to put that on my pictures every time,
I
but
know.
it's something that you have to. Like, I see guys stamp their stuff and it's like on the middle of the animal just because you can crop out if you put it on the side.
Yeah.
So you can easily crop it out or mark over it or something like that. And there's probably even ways to just remove a watermark. If people are really cunning enough on the
Oh
internet to
yeah.
do that stuff. So
Yeah. So I'm going to try to make it hard for them in different ways. Come up with some different things. Maybe the background will be, like you said, specific, or maybe it can be directly in the post where they really have to work at it, or just something that
yeah,
says
it,
it's
it's
unique.
it's hard to get. It's hard not to get some things sound. That they sound too good to be true, or you're feeling a little tipsy, or it's really early in the morning, so you'll believe anything. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just it's so simple now, and it sucks because it hurts people like you and me because we're trying to run an online business, but people think that we're a scammer because most people scam nowadays, and so it
Right.
just makes it harder because like for me, most people are pretty unfamiliar with what I do. Not like grasshoppers are typically UK stuff. So people are always like, "Are you in America?" I'm like, "Yeah, bro. I'm in Southern California, bro." You know. And then the same thing with the Khai Island stuff. The only people that are posting that are other Indonesian people, and so
Right.
people think that I'm some Indonesian scammer as well because they can't find my animals here. Um, it's not that they're not here; it's just I have most of them.
Right.
I have pocketed just about as many as I can.
It's a monopoly, folks.
Yeah, and so I love the animals. I'm honestly doing the best I can to have as many and learn as much as I can from them. And hopefully this leads us into our next topic a bit with learning all the monitors that I have. Um, I used to think I know we were talking about this last time where I used to think that I can just do them all the same, keep them all the same, and they'll just have their own flow and rotation together. Maybe
Right.
like how all women have their
Whoa.
quotation
Danger.
mark, yeah, okay, their whole thing together, right? And
Uh-huh.
that's actually I'm not sure if it's 100% true at all. That's science in theory, but I've heard both where they say it's not, and some people say it is. But I hope that all my monitors are the same, where their cycle is in sync, and they're basically doing everything at once, all of
Yeah.
it. Right now, what's great is that I didn't have to deal with 8 or 9 females all going at once. So that's actually better on my stress, right? And then I have them just periodically go. So I'll have a couple females that are really, they're with males and they're breeding, and obviously they're okay to go. But then I have other females that are either alone or there's a male in there just triggering them, seeing what they'll do, and I get nothing. And so I'm okay with that, because when I think about it, having half a dozen females all go at once, that's a lot. It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of food to crank in there without having to really know what's what and who's grab it or not. I'm just feeding the hell out of them. That may make them more fat than anything. So yeah, my new thing is learning behavior, trying to see, all right, these guys are obviously okay to be breeding, so let's worry about feeding them. Um,
Right.
but I have animals that aren't, and I have to worry about them differently. So, you know, with how I have everything now, it's better for me to just work on animals individually. And if they do have synced timings and everything is where I would say working together for those animals, then I'll keep at that. But for the most part, I'm gonna see how what they're showing me. If they're obviously attacking food and hitting the tongs and always out, running at the glass for food, then I'm probably gonna feed them a little bit more, just spread out. If they're not showing me much at all, and I probably won't feed them a whole lot. My animals, I'm gonna be reading them a lot better, just by what I've been doing a whole lot more lately. Just trying to pay attention to them individually. I used to take them all on, think of them as a group, and although they are a group, it's just they don't work that way. Um,
Right.
yeah. So
So you have your different individuals of the same species, but then you also have different species that don't all act the same. So one of the things the safe approach for me was to treat everything like an Australian monitor. And even in that, I would say more like an Ackie. And that's a base starting point, but definitely have learned some lessons about doing that. Um, and that's a common thing I think a lot of people have a mistake with is just whatever you're used to, whatever works for that animal or species you're used to is kind of where you lean to and what you start from. And that's okay, but be able to make those adjustments
yeah,
as you see the problems come up, or behaviors. As Kai was saying, wild caught monitors are going to act a lot different than monitors that have been captive bred for 30 years.
yeah,
That's just the truth about it. So in 30 years, might some of these Indonesian monitors act differently, more like something that you could kind of write down and count on, and that work maybe from coast to coast within a general range? Probably. But until we get there, until we cross that line with a lot of these things, that you have to
yeah.
treat them as individuals, and they have their own backstory about how they were caught, how they were handled. you know um it's all life and death out there. So where my Ackies and even the Kims will come running out of the cage when they see me coming for food, the Indonesian stuff is running into tubes as
Yeah.
soon as they hear the door open. So
Right. Yeah, and that's where my behavior and how I set up, it varies between even the same species, just different animals and how they behave. Right. So, honestly, I've always um, thrown this around where empty cage syndrome sucks. So, it's basically where you're feeding a cage, you never see the lizard, you might see its tail, water's dirty, food's gone, and that's all you get. Right. So that's empty cage syndrome, and people hate that. It's not really
Mhm.
rewarding. New beginners, or if you can't stomach that or take that and just accept that animal for what it is, it's not a really good pet. Um,
Right.
for me, what I've had to do is turn some of these animals that are very wild and almost too frantic to be around me or other animals. I've really had to get them out of their shell. And the best way to do that is by regularly trying to work with them. And it isn't, handling them and forcing myself upon them. I used to think it was that, where they're gonna love me regardless or something like that, or you're too overbearing, right? Or you're just kind of you're too
I love
touchy.
you so much.
You micromanage, and you kind of more so of deal with the animal and really um, try to tame it, right? But you're really it's not really working it's really working against you because that animal never comes around. So what I can what I do now for some of these animals is I have testing both theories out, where if an animal is okay with having been subjected to a cage that's more bare, it still provides the essentials like climbing and basking and having elevated stuff to do, but there are no major tuckaways that they can just disappear from me. If they are hiding, they're only hiding in a wedge, and they can still see me, and I can still see them, right?
Right.
But they're exposed now, and so I have two male Kai Islands that were both imported. One was imported as an adult, right? So he really hates life. But I've talked about him before. Um, his name is Ermius.
He
And then
hates
I have
life or he hates your life.
yeah, and then and then I have another male that I recently just got, and so I'm able to talk about two wild caught males that are basically frantic.
Right.
They're really skittish. You touch them and they kind of go berserk. Now, Ermius, he's quite old now. I found out that he's probably upwards towards 10 or 12 years old, because when they saw him years ago, he was already pretty a good size.
Okay.
So I would take it to at least several years old, and that was 8 or 9 years ago when they saw him. So
Oh man.
yeah, and
That's
so
good to have some history on him. That's cool that you can
right,
find out.
right. And so, I think about him like more of like an older guy now, right?
Hmm.
Not an old guy, but he's more primed, and he's really aware of himself. He's really confident, but he is still behaves like that wild caught type, runs away from you, really hesitant. He'll come and tongue feed and stuff like that, but he like my coming towards me is lava, or getting onto the floor is lava, and
Yeah.
so he'll know, and he'll actually pause and stop right at that fine line of touching me, and
Right.
if it is, he'll just go right back. He's like, oh no, I know what he's trying to do. I have gotten him to touch me a couple times, but after starving him for a good week or so, but that's his limit right now. That's our
Right.
relationship right now. And at first, I took away all his hides, but you can tell that he was kind of just hating it. Really more so of chargy, aggressive. He didn't have anywhere that he could just tuck away and feel comfortable. So I think he
Hmm.
just felt more exposed than anything, right? And and I think he's just so set in his ways. So I just gave him his logs back. Now the hollow tubes, they're no longer like just. I used to just face them any which way, throw them in. They're slanted against the wall, and if his head's poking out, his head's poking out, and I see him. It can be facing the totally different. The entrance can be facing a totally different direction than me, and although it's fine as a hide, it actually works against you a little bit because you can't be looking inside of it, and
Right.
he can't see you. Now, why I use these tubes, or why it's so popular for monitor people, or reptiles in general to use cork tubes, is because that's what they live in the wild. Um, We can explain
Not
about whole. We
just real quick for the listeners, not cork tubes, but tubes.
to
This
like they just tree hollows, right?
right,
So tree hollows is like basically it's a cork tube in resemblance, and
right,
they they provide that tight comfort where it fits the animal. Nothing else can harm it, or
get to it.
it can hang out there, peer out, tuck back in if it needs to, and basically be hidden by just moving an inch back into the thing. Now, young baby monitors, when they're born, majority of the species, even the ones that are, like savannas or whatever, that are typically more terrestrial types, they also take to the trees, and
Yep.
they live in a hollow in a tree for quite some time. They'll be eating in and around it. They'll travel up and down, but they'll return to these more primed area that they've already claimed, and been in and around, and that's where they're going to stay at. So reason why I recommend these tubes for everybody that has questions with how to tame a monitor, or how to get them to be friendly with you, or come out, or even experience them, right? um, I recommend you take out all the bottom hides and have just enough soil where it remains somewhat humid for you, especially if you moisten up a corner. But you're not trying to allow it to disappear into 10 inches or a foot of soil
Right.
yet. Okay, yet. Now these are
Yeah.
just for smaller enclosures, so they're for people that are trying to get their animal to come out of their shell. I'm not really recommending you to grab your animal and try to tame it, and this is how you're going to be bonding with it. I want you to really build a relationship with them, so that way it's harder to destroy your relationship with them. You're going to be building these, like Kevin from Nerd say, thread by thread to build a stronger
Mhm.
rope. And you're just, what it does is this tube, let's say if you elevate it and you have the entrance facing you, and you don't have any other hides in there, their only resort is to go into this tube, and then they are, a lot of times they're more comfortable in this anyways, and so they'll be able to peer out at you, and you can peer inside, and this will be your way to see if the animal, and you get reassured yourself that it's fine, without having to rip open the cage and do more harm to your guys' bond than good, right?
Right.
And so the animal can also feel secure, also assured that you're not going to harm it inside this tube. And then it can watch you, you can watch it, and you guys are
Right.
now doing this sort of dance now where it's you're not going to be touching it. It's you're leaving it alone, letting it, do its thing. If you want to feed it, put food at the entrance of the tube, let it eat from there, and try to just watch things as it does it. Then, as you get more comfortable, you can tongue feed it, try to lure it out of there. But this is your, for the people that have very shy monitors, this is your icebreaker, or your
Mhm.
timing of, all right, how do I start this bond. And so if you can get them to start taking food from you and then be comfortable with you because they've been watching you from time to time from this tube, um, then you can try to build from this, lure it out, try to get it onto your hand if it does, and if it doesn't, just take your time with it. The small monitors, they're really iffy, even with this with
Oh
this
yeah.
this method. So this method is more for animals that are somewhat really curious, but there's apprehension there. Then you can try this on the very, very skittish animals and just see how they are naturally. Don't even, try to tongue feed them. Just put food in there, see how they behave, and get
Right.
it to come out of its shell slowly. So, depending on where your monitor is at, you'll really have to put a halt on, your wanting it to be tamed. You're very far from that level just yet. But if your animal is, kind of apprehensive and not really nice, but still takes food from the tongs and stuff like that, this would be a great addition to your enclosure, where you'll just be working from this tube and trying to bond with it, through then. Um,
On that note, I'm also Some of what I've done for the quarantine cages and for the shy animals that I know are very fresh wild caughts to give them that peace until they adjust is I only put a door on half the cage. So I haven't installed the second set of doors yet because I feel like it might be too much for them. It's just something I'm trying out. So the other side of it is it's a pain to get to everything in the cage, that's for sure. So I don't know how well I like that, but with what you're saying, I wonder if what are they? They're it's like almost like a screen where you can see out, but other things can't necessarily see back the other way. Um, you know what
Yeah,
I'm talking about?
yeah, I
I
think I
wonder if something like that would work on some of the windows or like half the windows. Uh, just an idea. You had me thinking as you're talking about this stuff. Like, what's a way I could see in that they couldn't see me? And I wonder
well,
if something
I
like that
guess
would.
that's also a well. What sucks about that is when they do see you, then it's like, oh man, who's this guy? You know, I haven't seen him
True.
in a while. Yeah, that's I have this new mail, right? And so the what I've been trying to test out my things on. This guy, um, so when he was living at Mike's before, just before he came here, he's only really been here for a few weeks. Um, when he was living at Mike's before, basically he didn't really eat much because he was just always scared and living in a tube, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've had this thing too where the animals just tube life it, and it actually kind of hinders their health a little bit. You know, they're
Okay.
not really doing a
Oh yeah.
whole lot. Yeah, they're not doing a whole lot. They don't bass. They don't thermoregulate a whole lot.
Right.
They're basically missing out because they're more scared and they'd rather hide than come out for an hour because
Right.
you're around or there's noise or that's just how they are. Um, so with this guy, what I've done is going back to some older methods, even though I don't use these methods really much anymore because I'm not really against them. It's just they don't promote the best husbandry and things like that, and they're kind of older ways of thinking. And I'm trying to progress with all my setups in this way. Um, but yeah, so it's just really me getting to the point of this animal accepting the fact that I'm always going to be around. I took away a lot of hides. The only thing that I did give him was a fair amount of leaf litter. But other than that, he doesn't have a bunch of tubes or hides. He has a couple logs that he can kind of hide behind, and a water dish and a couple platforms to bask on, and that's really it. He spends a lot of his time hanging on the walls. He seems to really like that. But my most favorite part about it is that he's taking a lot of food. He's actually eating more than I thought he would. Typically, when animals are spending a whole lot of tube life and they come out rarely ever, they don't do a whole lot. They've basically been really stricken and um, more nervous than anything. I always assume that, man, these animals aren't going to really be doing too well, and so they don't. They either don't stay here, or they go to they may go back to where they came from. But in this case, I really thought, man, this guy he came to be so frantic, pretty frail, pretty skinny, and then now he's putting on weight, but being exposed to me and keeping him this way, like what I would say how I kept in the 90s and early 2000s, where I was just still using like newspaper or bare bottom setups or things like that. Now my cage is a newspaper and it does have the essentials. It's just not fully decked out like how I would normally set it up. I would normally set it up with several tubes to hide in, a bunch of clutter, because most of my more comfortable animals, that's the way they like their setups.
Yeah.
But these other animals that are more frantic, I kind of set them up where they have their necessities, but it's quite bare. There are no major ways to hide from me, just because I don't want them hiding all the time. And so this guy, because he does is exposed to basking more now, he's out in the open. Um, I'm I'm able to get him to eat more, put on some weight, and he looks really good. And I'm not forcing him to eat a ton where he might throw up because his stomach can't handle it. but he's definitely eating more and more by the week comes, and he seems to. At first, it was just one mouse, and then maybe a mouse and a chick, and now it's three mice, and then the next day a chick still. So it's pretty decent that he's wanting to eat so much. And
Good
now
stuff.
and now after a few months of this, I'm gonna sit and get him more and more comfortable. I'm going to then start adding some soil into his closure, have the humidity balance out a little bit because it's sort of dry now with just leaf litter. That's all I wanted. I just wanted, if he wanted to, he can tuck under the leaf litter and get into complete darkness, but he kind of just stays on his top levels and stuff like that rather than hanging out in the leaf litter, which I'm okay with because he's out in the open rather than being so, oh my god, I can't look at humans, I'm just gonna throw up. And there are those lizards like
Yes, there are.
you'll get a Dorianus or some older mangrove or whatever monitor. It was treated really horribly on import and everything like that, and captured and probably tied by the legs or by a noose, sort of like hog alligator tied. They those animals are gonna hate life.
Right,
They went through the ringer, and they'll do is they'll defecate at the sight of you, they'll
right.
regurgitate at the sight of you, drop their food at the sight of you, not even take food from you. So some people think, oh, my monitor's not eating. No, well, your monitor doesn't want to eat from you, um,
Right.
and that's a real truth sometimes. And I rarely ever say that. It's just because we can't, we're not there to know that the monitor hates you.
Right.
But that's a real truth sometimes. The monitor doesn't want to eat from your tongs because you're so overbearing, or it's not. And that's where the tube can come into play. It's in the
Right.
tube. You leave food in the tube. It's comfortable. It'll likely take it from there, and you can watch it as from afar.
Real quick on that too, Kai. Something I learned with some of these imports recently, these fresh imports, is that there's also those animals that, yes, the best meal for them to get some calories on board and whatnot might be rodents or might be some other type of like a chick or something like that. Okay, but they aren't willing to take it. Doesn't excite them to grab something that's dead. All right, so you have your choices of getting something live, which can pose its own issues, but what's usually safe is live bugs of something that, like the lobster roaches, in my experience so far, excite a lot better or entice a lot better feeding response out of the animals than a frozen thawed animal for these fresh imports. And as you would know, and I'm sure you've heard plenty of times with the grasshoppers, the same way.
Yeah.
So for if you run into that issue where you have an animal that isn't willing to eat, you have a very shy animal and wants to stay in a tube and it doesn't want to eat in front of you, not from tongs. This is where you have to be able to source some of these feeding items to help your animal catch on. And it might take months, before they really do. I've had a few of the tree monitors now take directly from the tongs, but usually it's like when they're in a tube and they're basically, you can just see their snout hanging out. There's a couple of them that'll take right off the tongs, but for the most part, that's where they need to be. A lot of the Timors and whatnot, good luck unless there's
Yeah.
if I've trained them to eat out of a tube, like then they'll readily kind of shoot their head out to eat it. They'll grab it, pull it back in, or um, gravid females, or I'm sorry, females going through the reproductive process will act a little differently. They'll be a little more aggressive towards food, but you don't want some of these animals, if they're going to be shy, they're going to die inside that tube. They're going to wither away until they're not strong enough to eat anything. And then you're in a whole nother predicament. So don't be stubborn with like pinks or chicks or whatever the food item is if it's frozen thawed. If they're not eating, get them something that they're going to eat. And if that's grasshoppers, I know somebody. So But it's true. They flutter, they jump, they move a certain way, and the animals like it. You know. Um, okay, I went on my little tangent about that. Should I go back to my tangent?
No, that's all right, man. You're it's we're on a million tangents anyways. I'm just looking at that list I sent you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
trying to
so
stay on track.
no, it's this is like, we got a lot. There's a lot that we have all the time. So there's many things that we can cover. This is not going to be such a crazy episode, but it's good to just get stuff in and talk about some of our experiences, because there's always going to be someone that can kind of relate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of that, with man, some of my Indicus stuff, I'm trying to see where I can put a lot of the work. I just dump it all on Facebook just because that's like the easiest thing to do. But man, I gotta probably put it on like YouTube. I have a channel. It's just I don't always update to it just because my videos are kind of crummy, or they're just quick, like 20-30 seconds. They're rarely ever like, oh, let me just explain a bunch of stuff. It's like, yeah, I just
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
oh. While we're on that, things that have I got a phone again. So, yay.
Yeah.
Too bad I'm flat on my back, but yeah, I got a phone that actually takes pictures and works again. So, things are
Yeah.
looking up.
Speaking about the phone. Thanks for sending me the pictures of those bulbs.
Oh yeah.
I'm going. I took a little big break from using some of the UV stuff just because I wasn't really understanding how to use the meter. Some of the bulbs I was going through, what complemented what the best, what didn't complement something so much, and
Right.
how I was going to adjust. Right. So um, my whole time, I've been really looking for low watt UVB and heat together. So mercury vapor bulbs that are 40 watts and 50 watts, but they don't exist.
Right.
And I had to go with 70-watt mega rays and other stuff that's like 80 watts, like the Power Suns or Solar Glow or whatever other ones. Um, I myself have had to, because summertime was so hot, using those bulbs in most of my enclosures, I would only really need to use one to heat up the enclosure. And although that does sound great, I have to disperse my heat out thoroughly. So that means I'd have to add another bulb there, which would make the cage too hot or make the basking spot all weird, or burn the animal if I only use one bulb. Or
Right.
they're more so, they're such big animals that one bulb isn't enough. And so what we recommend for these larger animals, bigger than 2 to 3 feet, we recommend multiple smaller watt bulbs, and that's where these 80 and even the 70 watt, 80 watt, and 100 watt, 125, 160-watt mega rays for me don't work because my cages aren't entirely tall. Um, but I've been spending some money and doing some testing and trying to get other things that I like and what I like the most. To be honest, I like my UV setup that are linear bulbs the most still, because they don't throw off so much heat, and whatever heat they do throw off is just enough to add a little bit of ambient to the enclosure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also have purchased like VivTech stuff, and I've purchased a couple other UV bulbs, and they were either too hot or like for my stuff that are slightly bigger, the VivTech stuff bulbs, although I love their style and they're only 3 watts and it's an LED UV, it's just not a whole lot for the one bulb that I purchased, right? The beam is very narrow, although it works efficiently for the distance in meter, um, and how strong it is. It's not fitting so well to what I want. Maybe
Right.
if I had some dwarf monitor baby hatchlings and I coupled that next to it, then that'd be a great usage for that bulb. But currently, I've had to put them back on the shelf until I figure out what I'm going to be doing more with them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just have to figure out what I'm going to be doing with those bulbs now. because I have smaller setups that I want to hook up and smaller lizards that would benefit from them. But what I want to really use these bulbs for are my bigger breeders, and bigger animals that, they seem to benefit from them. So I've been buying UV bulbs and looking up some more styles that I can get into, without um, without harming my animals. Trying to go the safe way. I feel like my Kimberleys, adding the UV or the mega rays back into the enclosure has seemed to really perk them up, for not having it over the winter time and stuff like that. I think maybe like a month or so ago, I put them back in just because I wanted to see a change, or see if they'll perk back up or something like that, because they weren't doing a whole lot coming into the season.
Right.
So I gave them UV, things like that. Started using this Jungle Dawn again. I just basically plugged it back in, turned off the VivTech one, turned on the Jungle Dawn, and basically have a it's a longer linear bulb. It's nothing crazy big, but it's a good foot long, I think, or 14 inches or so. And Yeah, it lights up the cage a lot better. It's the spectrum from a foot distance left to right still holds the same, rather than just one narrow spot. And so it lights up my enclosure a little bit better, gives them a better basking gradient, rather than having them just, it's really on a couple inches above their head or whatever. Um, so yeah, it's been some fine tuning, because I really now have to, once I come back from my trip up north, I have to literally go through. I bought a bunch of bulbs, and Alan's going to be sending me some new bulbs as well. Um, of these, what are they, bro? They're
They're 9 watt UVB LED bulbs. So basically, what they are is like so the bulbs that Kai is referring to for the listeners out there are 3 watt, um the smaller bulbs, and they have like, let's say they have one diode that puts out UVB. Now three of them might put out UVA, and then a series of other diodes are just bright LED lights like you'd find in a plant LED light. So they're just for light, because the UVB diode doesn't put out a ton of light whatsoever. In fact, I think, if you turn the lights off, you barely tell if it was on. You can if you look directly at it, but it doesn't put off a ton of light. That's one thing people need to understand. They don't put off a ton of light. Now, some of the newer constructions of some of these bulbs that I'm seeing, they have those brighter LEDs in there along with the UVA LED diodes and the UVB. So the 9 watt is essentially a bigger all around bulb, like how we say bulb, but it's a fixture that has a diodes in it. And it's basically like three of the 3 watts in one. So there's three UVB diodes. I think there's basically twice the number of UVA, and then the regular bright, like plant UV, whatever they are, LED diodes.
Yeah.
So um, hopefully they'll give Kai a wider spread of the UVB, still within one area, so the animals can get away from it, but big enough to cover the entire animal, or not. I'm sorry, wouldn't be
Or at
the
least
entire.
part of the animal, rather than, because what I was trying, what my goal was here, and if you look at the wattage here, I'm looking to use maybe 10 or 15 or less wattage. I don't
Mhm.
want to be adding another, because most of those bulbs are 70, 80 watts, and so what I'm looking for here is to use as many, or try as many of these different low wattage, less than 10 watts. So the one that Al's going to be sending me is a 9 watt. I'm hoping that that bulb, in addition to my two other floodlights that are connected to each other, work well. And so I'd have a three bulb combo that the two floodlights are already distanced enough. They cover a 3 foot lizard, which is basically the size of my animals, quite well, at least from nose to vent, or nose to most of the tail. is all
Right.
covered by basking lamp. And so if I add one more bulb, that's the UV one that we're talking about now, that's 9 watts. I'm hoping that that would give them, you know, the necessity and UV that they need. Um, I haven't really been putting UV to the test because I can say that animals under UV have bred for me, but also animals under not under UV have been breeding for me. So, and I've been having viable clutches both ways. Um, so I can't really say that, oh man, one's definitely the answer, one isn't, you know. Um, I'm testing them both out still. Not only do I notice when they're lethargic and I put them underneath the sun or I give them UV, they definitely perk back up in a different way. So, I have to really take that into account that, man, these dwarf monitors are small. Maybe they deplete calcium a lot more, or they need some. The sun is a little bit more beneficial for them just because they're so smaller. Or the fact that my Kimberleys are from an area where it does get much more sunlight, and my mangroves are dense jungle animals, and they don't get a lot of sunlight.
Hmm.
That's why they're still breeding, and they actually dislike intense UV so much. They rather not be underneath it unless it's the parameters are correct. And so
Right.
on some of these bulbs, the mercury vapors or even some of the UV bulbs that are highly intense, if you're using the wrong one or the wrong type of lizard just because someone recommended it for you, and they basically seem like they're squinting, you can see it, they'll be squinting underneath this light. It's almost like they have to use it, but it's so bright or whatever that they don't open their eyes fully. They'll also not really be basking and hiding where, well, they'll be hanging out where, if you use a solar meter, where their meter should be, where the actual distance and everything like that is proper for them. So for me, I've been trying to stay within the two to
Right.
three mark, right? And for the Kimberleys, I'm okay with 3 to 4, but still three is perfect for me. Now for the mangrove stuff, I'm aiming at about 2.5, and that's great for my distance so far and what I'm utilizing in the jungle dawn. That's an Arcadia bulb. And so yeah, that's to for the UVB talk real quick. I just you know um,
Oh, I'll
taking
add
it
a
back
couple.
and forth, and no, I'm sorry, just for my part, just
Oh,
adding it back and forth, and really testing it out here and there. I really have now found more smaller wattage bulbs and utilizing these just because the other ones weren't really cohesive with how my setups and my temperatures and everything are. They made the cages either too hot or it just didn't work too well. So what I like is something that's very low heat in addition to my floodlights, where I don't have to change my floodlight spectrum at all. With the 80-watt power sun or the 70-watt mega ray, it just kind of throws off how my basking gradient is.
hmm.
Yeah.
You
What
know,
were you
I
saying?
oh I so for the listeners out there that have been with us for a while, or if you look at my social media stuff or other things, you'll know that I don't use a lot of UV, and I'm a huge skeptic of it in a lot of ways. As of recently, though, I have been using more UV bulbs specifically, and I'll say that's the truth of things. I've been using them more, but some of it's out of necessity because California has some weird laws to get something like a regular incandescent bulb floodlight, where it has to be labeled like reptile bulb, and then you can still get it, but usually you're paying a premium for it just because it has a logo on it. So I'm been talking with Khai and trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to project for the future? What am I going to use to heat my enclosures for the future? Because we have this problem. So some of the things I've tested out is the smaller G9 and even some G10 halogen type bulbs. So the G9 fixtures are what Zilla's used in their like mini dome fixture, their Pro Sols, those type of things. And I've been able to figure out ways to use them that are very convenient and they work great. Um, but they have their limitations as well. And definitely for larger monitors, they're a smaller bulb, so it's a smaller basking area. And I'm hesitant to use them for large monitors unless I put like three of these Pro Souls next to each other to cover enough animal or to achieve what I want. So for the larger lizards, I've had to resort to finding some regular incandescent bulbs, which I have found now. They're still a little smaller than like your regular par 38 size, but also the
Coupled next to another bulb, they would probably do really well, right?
yes,
Coupled next
yes,
to another halogen or another floodlight, right?
absolutely. And for the smaller guys, they work fine. Um, but the medium sized monitors that I have, I still needed a larger bulb altogether. So what actually has been working for me is it's very similar to a Mega Ray. Basically, it's a all-in-one heat and UV 100-watt bulb. Now, the way I use it in the walk-in enclosures because I can get that bulb high enough off the ground where it makes still a good basking spot. I can keep my UV meter reading under 4 is what I'm aiming for. Because my own opinion, you can definitely oversaturate animals, including monitors, and it can be very detrimental to their health. Um,
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do here, learning the balance,
right.
because we know that monitors don't bask all the time. We know like lizards love to partially hang out in the shade and come out and creep out into the and go right back and forth, and they're not just the misconception of some reptiles that they're always loving the sun and sun chasing. It's just it's not true at all. If
Yeah,
that were
it's not true.
yeah, if that were the case, and they wouldn't have time to do all the other stuff.
Right.
That's basically it. They wouldn't have time to hunt and chase, and essentially, if they were to be basking, let's say your lamps are on 12 hours. If they were to be basking majority of that time, they really wouldn't have a whole lot of time to eat or do anything else.
Yeah.
They'd just be sitting there cooking, and then we know that's kind of like, oh man, where they're it's just sitting there, not doing a whole lot. Your cage is probably not hot enough. Your basking
Yeah.
surface temperatures aren't hot enough. For me, what I kind of watch is if they're sitting there all the time and man, they're just always kicked under there and don't seem to be doing a whole lot. For one, they're dehydrating at the same time. Now, if that were to be quick spurts and they're basking for several minutes or less than an hour, basically it's several minutes, bask, get up, go, come back, do the same thing, bask, come and go, and that's how they're gonna go throughout their day if they need to recharge. But if they're just sitting there laying there, they're currently dehydrating at the same time because they're just naturally dehydrating when they're basking.
Yep.
It's just so much heat on them.
So the way I have those set up in the large walk-in enclosures is, they're maybe a foot down from the ceiling, so they're still probably a good 3 to 4 feet away from the animal. And where I'm getting these from, so this is from Grant over at GX3. They're local to me. He went ahead and contacted his own manufacturers, and so he's getting these bulbs in. He used them himself with his animals, so he keeps a very few different. He keeps sail fins. He keeps black dragons, some lace monitors, a few other things, and he's worked with monitors for a long time. Um, so he tested them out first, and I've been able to go see his animals, see his setup, see how far he was using them. He's tested them. I've now tested them with my own meters, so I knew going into that these were safe to use, and I knew about how far away I needed to use them if I was going to use them. So what I was going for was through the colder months, I needed something that would heat the enclosure efficiently that was going to last a while, because I was going through in the winter. I keep 24/7 heat for those larger enclosures. It's a necessity for me. They have plenty of places to get away to hide. They can go down where it's dark and whatnot, but to keep the enclosures warm enough, I need to use 24/7 heat in these enclosures unless I'm going to put them down. Which it gets cold. There's enough of a temperature drop already. I don't want to turn the lights off there. Um, but I was also going through some of these regular incandescent floodlights, like one a month. Now, maybe it was my setups, but it seemed pretty regular at 24/7 on all the time. I was going through them like once a month. And here in California, they're not easy to get. So this mercury vapor bulb basically has been going on 3 months now. It's still doing everything the way it was supposed to. So,
Yeah,
and that's one of the things I had a discussion with Grant about was that they do last a while. And so far, it's doing everything I want it to. So, out of necessity, I'm using this bulb. Can I say that I see anything different in the walk-in enclosures? I can't because the animals were doing everything
fine
that
before, right? Yeah,
right. But I was feeding rodents. It's not like I'm feeding, a lot of roaches to these big guys or whatnot. But with the sand monitors, I've had clutches already with no UV whatsoever. So I'm curious to see what the next upcoming clutches now using UV will be. Will they be larger? Will they, be healthier? I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna take from this yet, but I am using more of it. Also, with the I mentioned this in another podcast, the animals that I'm trying to just use bugs on or that will only take bugs right now, I'm definitely offering UV because I do think it makes a difference if they're not willing to take any rodents or anything. So I'm using them in there, and I'm using the some Zoom Ed tube types, and I'm also using some UV types, or I'm sorry, LED types. Um, so everything seems to be working all right now. I don't see any real
I haven't
difference.
I haven't bought any of those. I find them kind of pricey. The Although I spent a ton on bulbs. I spent a
Yeah.
ton on bulbs to be brought in, for us. Um, but
Are you talking about the Zoom Ed ones, or which one are you
any of
talking
them,
about?
the ones that are, yeah, they look like a little block, right? And
Oh, I'm not using those. I'm
oh,
sorry. I'm using the regular like T5
okay.
Zoom stuff. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, to be clear, so Sumed has a newer bulb out that's an LED UVB is what Kai's referring to. It's expensive.
It's like
But
$120 or something.
yeah. I would be willing to try it to see what it's about, to give it a go, but I haven't seen, all the different things. I also use the mini tubes that Zilla puts out for the Pro Souls because they take those G9 fixtures. So I'm using a few different brands, a few different types. Um, Everything seems to be working fine, but I can't necessarily say I'm seeing a difference
Yeah.
between when I wasn't using them
That's
and now.
that's the hard, that's why we can't really, you and I can't really say indefinite, like, oh yeah, UV definitely makes a difference in egg production alone, or it, you get success better. Not to say that it doesn't either, okay.
Right.
But there are some instances, like I said myself, where my animals have perked up because of UV, especially the Kimberleys definitely perked up because of UV, because they didn't really have much of it through wintertime. I kind of just kept their bulbs relaxed and not all blistering hot, and you know they just they basked a little bit longer, but it's not anything crazy.
And
And
you bring up another thought that I've had about using UV is just what if you started it out on a scale where you started providing UV, at certain times during the spring and then more UV in the summer, and then you backed it back off and didn't use it through the winter. So, you're almost giving your animal both worlds where they can, if there is any kind of radiation involved where it's absorbing that, maybe it can deplete some of that as
right,
well.
yeah,
So,
we don't know how harmful some of these newer bulbs are as well. That's a
yes,
tricky thing. We're using our animals as guinea pigs for some of these newer stuff, and hopefully we're paying attention enough to really see if this will do the trick or not, or if these are the number one bulb. They're I don't now that we're looking at it, and you and I we're pretty accepting to a lot of new things, even if it doesn't work for us. it may work for a whole nother setup. And
Right.
I think that's where all of these bulbs come into play. What we're talking about, I think we're covering half a dozen bulbs. Where there's mega rays and there's power suns and there are the fluorescent tubing still, the T5 stuff, and there are the like I have the jungle dawn stuff. Now there's different degrees of UV on how they have it, rather than just having like a desert and a what do you call before, like a desert or a
Right.
rainforest before, right? It was a 2.0 or 5.0 when we were younger. Now it's a whole lot different, better understanding. We have these UV meters now that are also helping us read, and judging by the animals' natural habitat, you're gonna go by and gauge what what it should actually read in preference for that animal.
Right.
So yeah, it's tough because all of these can be beneficial in a setup, either which as sorry, they're beneficial for just about any setup as long as it's complementary to how that setup needs to work.
Right.
Like your tall ones, your 100 watt, 160 watt UVB large mercury vapor bulbs do really well because your tall cages can support it, right? But
Right.
my 3 to 4 foot cages, not so much, just because those bulbs in those cages basically will overheat it and how I want to do the basking bulb. So my dilemma is this: I, I want to have 3 spots that take bulbs, so it's 3 different fixtures, and it covers the whole lizard because that's mandatory, right? And what's not mandatory, or what isn't recommended more so, is having one giant bulb over the lizard, and that also causes burns and whatever else.
Right.
So for me to use a 80 watt or even 100 watt, and then still use my other floodlights that are already a standard size, they don't really get too much lower than 35, 40 watts. Um, it's really difficult. Well, let's say if in his really big enclosures, he can have the floodlight next to a decent sized power sun or mercury vapor bulb, and they'll still work pretty well because that cage can support it. But in
Yeah.
mine, not so much. Um,
Oh, one other thing for people out there that I wanted to make sure, if you're gonna get the LED UVB bulbs from VivTech or whatnot, um, I would recommend not using them in a double dome fixture because the heating element you might have next to it is going to be enough. If it's anything over like 50 watts, it's going to be enough to actually overheat the LED bulb. There's a reason, like on the small ones, especially, you'll see that housing. It's housed in a way that's meant to also cool it off. And if it can't cool off, it's going to overheat and you're going to kill your UVB bulb. So don't use them in a double dome if you can avoid it, or use it on a much lower wattage like heat fixture in that double dome with it. So the way I've had to use them, unfortunately I had to learn that lesson, is
you melted one.
what's that?
You melted one.
No, they just overheat. They don't melt because it's usually metal housing, but the whatever circuits are, because it's basically like a little computer chip inside of those. They can overheat, and they do actually get really hot, even though LEDs don't put off a lot of heat.
The whole
The
unit, the whole unit itself, when I touch it, it gets quite warm.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So take that into account when you're setting up your lights and everything. So I've been able to use them in those ceramic fixtures. Just like you can get the plain ceramic fixtures like we've used for ages that are $1.99, or like the newer version that have a metal bracket you can screw to the top of a cage. I've used it in that way. That's mainly what I'm doing now. I'm buying a ton of those, and so I have the heating element and then the LED UVB bulb on one side of it. So, and pointed out a big enough basking spot where they can choose to be under it or not. So, on one side of the basking spot, they can be under UVB, and on the other side, or most of the other circle, I guess you could say, they can be away from it, or they can kind of choose if they want a gradient on that basking spot. Also, they can go on the far side of just the UVB where they don't have to be in the basking spot, but they can still be under the UVB if they want to. I'm doing this so that I can see what they're doing, what they prefer. Unfortunately, I don't notice anything. I just see monitors running around a cage. or the ones that hide are hiding somewhere in the cage. So I can't say I'm noticing one way or the other, like anything specific. Um, sometimes people tell me, well, I see my monitor just basking. I don't see my monitor sit that long. I don't,
Mine don't sit there underneath the UV like that.
right.
They
Mine,
don't sleep there. That's for sure.
yeah, mine don't do that. In fact, that kind of concerns me sometimes when someone says, "Oh, he likes to take a nap under the." I would take a look at some other things because usually they're under that heat bulb for a second. They'll warm up. They'll kind of flatten out and do the whole pancake thing. They'll warm up, especially right after they eat, or if they're gonna take a dump. Sometimes they'll do that, and then they're off and running again. You feed them some, they'll go try to warm up. I don't know, just watch their behavior and make sure what you're seeing is them liking that UV and
Yeah,
not something else going on.
mine. When I have the other UV on, they're like once they're done basking, they're on the other side of the enclosure.
Right.
So that's where I'm like, oh man, is your current UV too strong? I try to have it like at the very farthest end of the cage, and then the other cage, the whole other section of the cage is almost dark.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah,
And I will say this: nothing replicates the sun. Animals instinctively know what the sun is. Okay, they're not going to be fooled. And something funny that I guess I should mention here, I don't know if I mentioned it before, is when I was trying to keep grasshoppers. I'm not good at it, so I stopped trying. Um, when I had the doors shut and just like the regular lights on in the room, when they would flop out of the cage, they would kind of flutter to like over here, over there when I'm chasing them. If I had the like roll up door open, they would jump out of the cage, do that like inverted fighter jet turn, and then just take off and never hit the ground straight out to the sun.
yeah,
Okay.
they
Now
know.
these are bugs and these aren't monitors, but we talk sometimes about, or you've heard it said that monitors have like an extra cone in their eye that might help them see in a different spectrum. It's theorized. I want to say that it's theorized that it's the UVB spectrum, but honestly, we don't know that yet. I haven't read anything that confirms that that's what they're seeing.
Yeah,
So that's part of me being a skeptic. It's like, well, hold on a second. Have we done like a test in any direction to confirm that, or is it just what we think is going on? So that's like tangent on top of tangent. Going back to the grasshoppers, if that is what's going on, I definitely noticed that with the grasshoppers. They know exactly what the sun is, and that's
yeah,
where they want to be to get away from me.
they're addicted to the light.
Right.
Addicted to the light. Yeah,
So, and we'll also hear of animals like when you have a cage that's set up near a window and maybe they get the morning sun. And I hear it a lot that, well, the animal will go up to the glass and because they like the UV or the UVB. But hold on, UVB does not penetrate normal window glass. Okay. So it's not the UVB they're going after. So what is it that is, they're still being attracted to it. You're seeing what you're seeing, but
yeah.
what is it exactly? That is it just they know that's the sun, that it brings warmth? Is it still the rays of the sun heating up, the cage in a different way? Or do they just enjoy it? So different things to be aware of. You know, things I think about all the time. Um, yeah, I guess I'll stop with that. I could go into more things I'm messing around with. It'll never be done with me until I have an answer I'm satisfied with. I'm
Yeah.
going to try everything. I'm going to keep a base group that I kind of judge things against. That's just how I operate. It's my own little, going to probably be my lifelong little experiment where I know for myself what's going on and what I like and what I don't like. I will say that I like the LEDs in a cage. I think they give off good light. In fact, I got these strip little LED lights that have a thin cover over them, so they're not like a rope. They're in a piece of plastic, and they have kind of an opaque piece of plastic, and they can screw right into the top. It's just a small strip. They're cheap. Something else that Grant started carrying, and I think they're maybe about like 18 inches to 2 feet. So in a 4 foot cage, that's great. I don't like them when they span the entire cage because I want like a dark corner for the animals sometimes still. Um, but it still gives off some real good light. And so I'm messing around with those in conjunction with the UV or cages that don't have UV and just a basking light and different things like that. So, kind of what I got going on, just as far as lighting.
Yeah.
We got on that one hard.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to cover. We can go through our whole setups kind of and basically go on a million tangents, but yeah, man, I've just been swamped lately. Finally
No,
started finally started shipping out monitors again.
yeah,
Yeah, my first first one of the year was a good success. No headaches. Man, this person was been waiting since like November since I hatched them.
oh man,
I could have shipped it. It's just there's two things. Sometimes the mangroves take a little bit to get going how I like them to go. Like they're little gremlins. So to anybody else that doesn't kind of understand what I mean, they just pop out of nowhere like their food and disappear and then they're gone, right? And
yeah,
so to most beginners that is very bad because they think, oh man, what's wrong with this little lizard? It's not perky. It's captive bred. It's supposed to be. So I kind of keep them a little bit, get them out of their shell, get them tongue feeding and or somewhat used to me, right?
right,
Or used to like a routine, so that way I can just have this other person copy the same routine, and then it's just really adjusting and transferring routine. That's really just it. But another reason is because the whole complex of indicus. I mean, and even most monitors, they start off one color and then they end up a whole another color.
yeah,
So for me to sell them while they're still very black with little spots, I kind of have an idea on what they're going to look like because I've seen it a dozen times because I've hatched out quite a few, right? But I just love to see it over again, and I
yeah,
want to see what comes in underneath. If it's something different than I've already produced before, is it the same? And really, is this something worth keeping? Is it worth more than it is, or whatever? So I kind of hold some back for several months, just like now. So now October, November, December, January, February, March. I've held on to them for half a year roughly, and grown them slowly, not rushing them because I don't want to. Nor not only do I want a bunch of sub adults here. I'd rather keep them small as possible so the person can also enjoy them, but I don't need for them to grow really fast. Yeah, I don't want them to be all that fast growing,
right.
and yeah, just you take your time. You're gonna get fed a few times a week. That's perfectly fine. There's no need to stuff you every day. They don't even like that, um, and so yeah, I just been been playing with my monitors more, especially this these last couple clutches from 2021, because that was a very good year for monitor wise for me, but just just learning a whole lot, and then now coming into this year hatching coli and just things like that, getting into the mix a little bit more, having animals lay and getting new animals too. So yeah, man, it works. The new big female took a couple bites to the tail recently, but I washed those out, took out the water dish, and she just dried up, like healed like Wolverine kind of.
Yeah, and they
So
do.
yeah.
And to anybody that hasn't tuned in before or didn't catch it, why or Kai, do you want to explain why you're taking out the water dish?
Oh, I take out the water dish to keep the wound from getting wet, and then they spend so much time and they shit in the water and it gets mucky. It basically becomes a bacteria build in a day or so with the heat buildup, right?
Right,
So I avoid that by keeping the water clean and just giving them a smaller water dish that she definitely can't get into and
right.
wet her wounds. So those wounds basically heal up very fast if they're dry and kept steadily dry rather than allowed to be wet. So even when I rinse them with iodine and water, I pad them dry, and then I let them sit in a like what it is a ton of paper towel at the bottom of a bin, and it's just soaking up all the excess water, and then they go into a cage.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then it sucks because the male's like, man, where's my water dish at, bro? I like this thing. He loves just thrashing in it and going
Yep.
underneath it, and yeah, if he can have a huge water feature, he'd probably really love it. But I can't really do that for the whole setup. Um, it's just the nest bins are more important. So um, I got to get him something like better elevated. Then I can probably do a one that's slightly bigger, and then he
Yeah.
can just go underneath it. I don't lose space. But yeah, if I give him a larger water pan right now, it's just like, and then not only that, lugging that thing too. I have these
Right.
kitty litter pans that are big enough. They're like, I don't know, 30 inches or 24 inches or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, I think the same thing about the Dorianus. The larger dish or larger dishes that I give them, they'll be in, and so you know, I was afraid of this, but I think they like water. They're a little more aquatic than I want to admit.
yeah, they
And
definitely love water, man.
yeah,
Yeah,
and you would probably know more about this with the Indicus complex, but especially they're mangrove monitors. Mangroves grow
yeah,
in water, near water, and a lot of these animals, I wouldn't be surprised if they can't run through the treetops or run through the brush. Um, they do the iguana thing and just drop into the waterway and swim
yeah,
off.
yeah.
Um, I found them sleeping in there. So it's funny when I find them sleeping in there sometimes and they realize I'm in the room.
Yeah, my guys sleep in the water all the time on hot
Yeah,
days or whatnot. Sometimes they sleep in the water too much. I'm just like, yo, it's just you're just making a mess.
right, right. I'm taking this away from you. And it's
Yeah,
not like the humidity in the room is off. The humidity, I walk in there, I'm already sweating my butt off. But
yeah.
yeah, they just
Sleeping
like,
on the water's edge. I think that's what they like to do.
yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if they tuck under those branches, those the roots actually, and into a moist or wet earth and whatnot, and just their pattern, everything it works. They stay cryptic under there, and I'm sure yours do the same thing. They curl up their tails, just get real compact. Even if they're a large lizard, they can get real compact under those areas, and
yeah. Just
yeah,
to disappear on you too, man.
right,
Disappear on you. Like I have a underneath the basking area for my 8 foot enclosure, and I have it in my other 7 footer as well. Um, Underneath the basking area, I have like that's because it's hot.
mm-hmm.
Um, I have this pile of just like leaves. Like it's just there's already a 10 inches a foot of soil in the cage, but then there's just so much more, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, they spend a lot of time going through that as well, like not on
yeah,
top of it, but through it. And they like either add to it or they'll take from it and they kind of level it out a little bit, but and then I just throw more on top.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the stimuli with the leaf litter and how they get to utilize it. I was kind of talking about this. I always brash about this where people they have pretty cages but they don't have functioning cages, um, just because they don't really think about the soil. Like you look at how they made the enclosure, it's like you only left 2 inches for the bottom. Like that's not enough, right?
Right.
So um, it's to make the cage complete. That's why I call it pretty. It looks nice, but it's just missing some functionalities in it that'll definitely make it the cage it should be. And
Right.
that's essentially 1 foot, 2 foot, or even more, depending on how much soil you need. To have sustainable humidity, nesting options, and whatnot, and even just for the animals' stimuli. Um, when you for me, I always think about having a lot of this when I was younger or just growing up. Like, all right, I'm gonna have a ton of soil, but man, it was so hard to actually really achieve. You know, like let's
Yeah.
say having a ton of sand before when I had flavies or flavy crosses. I basically killed the female because I didn't keep the sand and everything like that moist enough. And I think my nesting options were just really crummy, just because what I was able to apply and what I really knew,
Yeah.
like the sand needed to be, you know, sure, someone told me, hey, what you're using is sand, but no one told me that you also need to add pitchers of water into there, and have it so it holds a burrow really well. You
Right.
don't really understand that part. And so you just have, a foot of sand and you think you're done, but really that's actually not adequate at all.
Right.
um, and so now I really think about what I have going on with them. If I don't have them with a bunch of nice soil, that sandy soil that they can turn, um, man, their skin sucks. Their skin is
Yeah.
it almost like it deteriorates on itself,
Yeah.
um, and either it's stuck shed or it just basically looks like the skin is dry, and then it takes from the color, the overall the animal just looks and appears more drab, right? And so
Yep.
I've seen them when they're gorgeously like hydrated, fresh shed. Man, the skin, the color looks amazing. But I've had them where I set them up and I kind of kept them quite dry for a little bit, whether it's getting them into season or just trying to change the weather a little bit. Basically, you can definitely see the difference in some of their look. And
Yeah.
then they're like revamped. I add the humidity and all that stuff back in, and the animal looks, wow, you look really good. Your yellows are popping and all that stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it is with my bigger male. I actually learned that, man, this guy likes the sandy soil, like deep before, because remember before I was only using like dry and dry mixed sandy soil, or I'd
Right.
have that mixture with like the cocoa blocks or the cocoa chips,
Right.
right? And that, like, people would say that that's a really good bedding, and in some cases it can be, but for me and what I want to use it for, it's not great at all. And so I like the whole consistency of soil, and my animals, it's like they're all wild caught, so it kind of gives them a real natural feel, and they really get a real a real stimuli out of doing the digging and turning it all. So yeah, man, I can't take that away from them anymore. Before, it's like, all right, I could just give you a little bit whatever, and I'll maintain your humidity, right? But
Right.
now I don't keep like that anymore. I have my enclosure work for me, and I no longer just I have to mist you or I have to soak you because I need to get
Right.
your humidity right. Now I have this cage work for me, because doing that in 10 enclosures or with a dozen animals. I mean, even 5 animals. That's 5 bins, or 5 times you got to refill those bins to soak them all, or it can be a headache to have to do that, whatever, weekly or something like that, or daily, however you need to do it.
Right.
So
So
yeah.
hence why I'm on my back right now. Now a sneeze did it, but it was probably all the work I did, the couple days prior to that. But you're right, and I tried to. I use the cocoa blocks basically. I use it with some dwarf monitors. For the way I have it set up, it works great. I'm not missing anything with the ones I'm using it with. I can spray them down, it dries out, but they have nest boxes, humid hides they can get to, and it seems to be working fine. I can also use it with certain animals, like I have one-off males that I don't have anywhere to go with right now, um, kind of in a temporary setup, and they work fine. Um, but like you said, I do have to be on top of spraying or making sure that there's moisture in the cage other than just the water bowl and whatnot. So that is part of the game. Now, I don't spray every day. I'll spray every 2, 3 days for some of these guys. I don't use it with the none of like the Dorianus. I was at first, but I've since changed. There's one that I still have to change, but he's got like 6 inches of that stuff, so it's still wet on the bottom. So it's accomplishing kind of what you're talking about. it's accomplishing what it needs to right now. But part of why I had all this sand and peat moss and whatnot was to mix up because I wanted to switch to
Yeah.
using
Do a
like
70-70-30 or 80-20 and the least amount of soil.
yeah. That's what I was planning on doing instead of laying here on my back like a bum.
And then have like the stuff that's dry, so that way you can just add it on top. You just skip that drying step.
And put that layer up on top.
Yeah, just put that
Um,
on top.
and it's another reason why I want to get a nice source of leaves too, because I like
Yeah,
putting the
the
leaves on top.
the leaf litter just basically lets it slow dry. Very, very good.
Yeah, so the soil underneath dries real slow. The top is still crisp. The leaves tend to dry out, so you need to throw some more on. But at the same time, the leaves are also breaking down, getting into that soil. So if you have, usually if you're keeping monitors or eating stuff like that, you have some kind of bioactivity going on. And what we've pointed out a few times, and Kai's talked about too, bioactivity doesn't mean you need these, pumpkin bubblegum isopods from wherever. Okay,
Yeah,
bioactivity can be the buffalo beetles or superworm beetles or something that helps, break down whatever matters in the cage.
yeah. And
Okay.
springtails come naturally. You just add leaves and they
Oh
appear.
yeah.
Yeah, they just appear. Okay. So you should be able to kind of develop your own, and though if your enclosure is adequate enough, it'll support the bioactivity. If
Yeah.
your enclosure falls to a very low dry all the time and very low humidity, no microhabitats for them, right? They'll not really thrive at all. So yeah, it's a balance, and that'll be one of your cues if your isopods or your springtails basically are depleted and they're only really lively right around the water dish, then your cage is way too dry.
Right.
That's for my animals and how we have the soil. That's what I read. You know, I I personally, because sand dries out a little bit more, but that's just how they like it. I have to go in every few weeks, roughly every month, every other month, give or take, just with depends on how large of a volume it is. If it's like in a bin, the bin stays enclosed so well, and there's really only one entrance and one exit, so that
Mm-hmm.
way air really can only escape through there. So a lot of times it's just recycled in the bin. Um,
Right.
and so that those bins kind of stay a lot more consistent unless there's a really hot heating source next to it, and then it kind of evaporates really fast. Um, but for the most part, they stay pretty consistent. But my larger volumes, I take a whole gallon pitcher, or like what I use is the large Arizona jugs after I'm
Yep.
done using them, and they come with a little handle, and I just usually just I use lukewarm water and I pour it all over the surface, let it saturate. Now, if it saturates and it starts to disappear very fast, then I know, all right, I gotta kind of this is gonna need some more. I'll have
Right.
to then before I add more water, turn all that first, see what you accomplish, and see when you're squeezing your hand and if it holds really well, or if you've added too much and then you got to add some dry sand in there and cut
Yep.
cut it basically, and level it out with how much sand and wetness you have there. But yeah, man, that's basically what I'm doing all the time now, turning soil almost every day.
Oh, I believe you. Oh, and also, as you'll know, but for the listeners, the soil that's usually under the basking spot. Sometimes, so if you have your basking spot, you're hitting the higher temperatures you want, but then from there you go from like 90 down into the 80s as it gets farther away from the basking spot. Um, in my experience, that's where a lot of the monitors are going to want to lay, but it's still close enough to the basking spot where it dries out faster. Okay, so you'll need to focus sometimes on that. So you're not going to get away with just not sometimes you just have to turn everything. That's where some of the nest boxes are nicer. And if you're going to use a nest box, like the hole that Kai was talking about, you might want to turn away or have it on the side that's away from the heating element. I like to put mine so that one end kind of reaches the high 80s because it's close enough to the basking spot. But you also have to be aware that that side's going to dry out faster. So I'm in there still turning stuff around. But also in your basking spot, if you have still a lot of good ventilation, I'm sorry, in your nest box, you can also use leaf litter on top of that. It gets kind of be a pain, but it can also lock in the moisture plus the top on top of it if you're losing too much moisture out of there. But it's also going to hold in moisture too. So sometimes you might find it's kind of getting stagnant. So
Yeah.
if you have it too moist or you have the wrong mix going on. So, and we were on what I think it was Robert Fox was talking about putting the holes in the bottom. Um, that's a great idea. Now I haven't really had to do it yet, but I can see it in certain situations where I might need to do something like that, so that it has another way to drain if it needs to. Um, but different ways to you're either turning up a bunch of soil. So I like the nest boxes and I love the animals that'll use them regularly. Those are my favorite. But for some things like Kai was talking about, you might need to use that significant bank. The desert animals, they might get away with drier areas and then just have that humid hide to retreat to. Whereas the Indonesian species, you're like Kai was saying, you're going to see a difference in their skin if they're not hitting those humidity goals they need,
Yeah.
and water goals they need. So something to take into consideration, and also do your stretching, your exercises. Don't end up like me.
Yeah, don't end up like us, man. Back to back.
Yeah, or have someone you could call, because I know there's some hungry animals over there right now. I'm trying to thaw out what I can. I'm just throwing it in there. Hope you guys don't eat each other. Bye. oh, on that note, I had a buddy. I haven't seen now. I've had like probably hundreds of Ackies go through that I've had my hands on so far. Either the raise ups or the adults that I now have that are producing more and whatnot. Um, I've never seen an Ackie eat another Ackie. I've heard about it, but I've never seen it. I had
Did
a
you see that
buddy
video?
which well, I had a buddy that showed me one, yeah, and I was just like, what in the hell?
Yeah.
Like it was basically the same size Aki, and it had it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Someone sent me that same video, I think.
that was
Yeah.
insane. And I didn't know what to say really, because I've heard of it. Might it be a fluke? Yeah, or maybe they going after the same food item and they just the
Yeah.
feeding
I
response
haven't
is.
had that happen yet either with any of my hatchlings.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I've actually kept clutches together that were maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks apart. So even then, those bigger ones didn't eat the little ones. But
right.
that's because I try to be on top of feeding and stuff like that, and I'm there all the time. But they're always I can be sleeping, and they hack on each other or whatever, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tough thing. That's where, oh man, I've seen Blake Wilson post a picture of a bigger Argus eating his slightly smaller Argus.
Oh
Now
man,
these are bigger animals. Yeah, yeah. So, oh man,
that's
Argus, they're gluttons.
yeah,
They eat a lot.
that's so crazy. Because of course, the sand monitors are close in relation, but I haven't seen anything like that with them. Now, initially, I did have two sand monitors together, and one died. It did have bites to its arm, but the bites weren't enough to kill it. They weren't infected either. So that was early on. Now, that same animal, I went straight into pairing up with another animal about a month later, and there's no problems. That's actually that's where all of the babies have come from so far, is those two animals. So I don't know what to make of it. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was just that animal being stressed for some other reason because of that animal biting it. So you do run the risks sometimes of these things happening, which is horrible. And I'm try in every way to not let that happen. But and I still get bites here and there and nips like you were talking about, Kai, treating tails and whatnot. Um, my two Savannahs will just go, not go after each other. I shouldn't say it like that, like they're fighting, but one will just be like, "Hey, give me that food you're eating," and like kind of like nip on the side of the head, right on the
Dude,
foot part.
mine grab the whole top of each other's head. Like sometimes they, I just, I mean, I try not to freak out about some wounds like that, but it's like you're bleeding from the head, bro. Like,
Oh,
are you okay? You know?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
See,
just like,
mine don't draw blood. There might be a little chafing, but those two Savannahs, they don't draw blood on each other. It's almost, and they do it to each other. The smaller one will do it to the bigger one, and it's kind of funny because they neither one back down. I don't have one that's like stressed out over the other, so I just kind of let them go at it.
yeah,
That's the truth.
mine, like if the male has food and then he's finished, the female has food, and he's like, all right, I'm just gonna go over here, grab her by the nape, grab her by her head. Sometimes it's like grabbing it where she's grabbed it. It's like, oh man,
Yeah,
yeah. And then I gotta kind of, what I do is I poke right here underneath his gull, and
yeah.
yeah, and then they typically let go without me having to shove my finger in their mouth, which I don't really want to do.
Oh, my Kimberleys do it a lot. They'll grab the head of the other one if
Yeah,
they got a roach.
grab the. Yeah, man, it's like, come on, you guys are annoying. Just wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, they're not leaving any marks. There's nothing to make of it all, just other than like their little tiff. But yeah, as far as one's eating it, and in the past, I had this was 20 years ago. I had some tristis um, clean another tristis clean. There was five of them, then there was four of them. And I saw the head, the spinal column, and the tail, and everything else was picked clean. And
Man,
so,
I actually love seeing that. I haven't had my monitors. They preen their food, but they don't. That's cool to see watching them pick clean like a carcass, kind of.
yeah,
Type deal. Yeah, that's cool. I used to have this Dorianus that I fed like big jumbo rats, right?
yeah,
That it'd be a murder, and back then I was kind of sort of immature with some of the animals, so like I would just feed it a big rat just to see it kill it, right? Well, basically it killed it and ate it from the inside out. Basically gutted it and ate everything and left the hide and the tail.
yep.
Yeah.
I still do it with large quail for the sand monitors and the savannas. I'll throw one in there from time to time, and they go for the soft part, and you'll see them like spit out feathers a little bit if they
Yeah,
can.
they preen. They definitely my guys preen it. Like they'll just bite at it and then they just flick it back out and then they go to the fleshy part. I've
Yep,
actually had to some of these chicks that we get, right. They come with a ton of down feather, right? A
yeah,
ton of feather, and it's quite annoying. Now on the end result, all the feathers that the monitors crap out end up kind of dusty in the air if you let your if that's what you're mainly feeding, and obviously the animal defecates in the cage. You're not going to always get it, and when the cleanup crew is cleaning, they're not really cleaning the feathers because it's kind of indigestible to them.
right.
So you end up with a bunch of ton of that dust.
You see
Now,
that murder scene?
yeah, you end up for me, I get that's a whole bunch of allergies for me.
Oh boy.
Or more so, it makes the dust like more unwanting to really deal with. So
Yeah.
what I do is I kind of pull most of those feathers now from those day old chicks. I let them thaw out for 30 minutes or so, and then when they're like mid thaw, it's like really easy to pull the feathers off of, and then now I just feed those sort of defeathered. Now my
Yeah.
animals still get roughage in their pipes, so they're not just eating straight meat. They're obviously getting still some feathers. I'm not defeathering every chick, but majority. But I also feed crustacean and
Yeah.
plenty of roughage, and I don't dehair the mice at all or defur the
No.
mice at all. So
Yeah.
it's just the immense amount of feathers on the chicks and things like that that they're gonna pull off sometimes anyways. They sit there and yeah, if I
Right.
give them a head or the neck part, and if it's covered in, they don't actually want to even bite it. They'll drop it. You know.
Yeah, and something I should point out. Yes, monitors will nip at each other and whatnot. I haven't been afraid to. I'm not afraid to keep the ones together that I have together. It's within normal range of behaviors. But I also want to say that there's times when I have fed monitors larger items they can't handle themselves, such as we're kind of talking about. They will actually carry it to another monitor or bring, like, they know what they're doing, and so both animals will pull on this food item and pull it apart, and then they're eating what's inside.
Yeah.
So you're going to miss some behaviors, some of their intelligence, not doing some of these, or at least experimenting. Never put your animals in dangerous situations, but be willing to explore, what they're capable of, because they will work together on some things. From taking apart a large food item. I mean, a good example of this would be the Komodo dragons too.
Yeah.
One of them will go bite a deer, they'll all chase it down, and then everybody's having a party. You know, it's the same in captivity to a certain degree. You can see the same behavior with some animals.
Yeah.
They will pull it apart. Ackies will do it with large bugs. They'll,
Yeah. If you left a large carcass in there, they'll definitely work on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they're not afraid to work together. So, it makes me think, when one eats another one, was it a mistake? Do they know what they're doing? I don't know. There's so much to, I'm sure there's other people that'll have experiences. If you've had some of these experiences, even though they're unfortunate ones, tell me about it. Send me a message, send me a little story. I'd love to hear what you guys, or maybe
Yeah.
the information around it. Um,
Yeah, before we get off, I just wanted to kind of go over some things too. With some of the new recordings that we'll be having and things like that. We're trying to do some more species specific. So, if you have anything that you recommend or anything that you want to hear us talk about or have a guest on, message us,
yep.
message Alan, or message myself.
Now there is a few something we've been talking about. Actually, I'll hit you up afterwards for a guess. Um, you know, and a few of these topics. So some of these keepers that keep something specific. Um, we want to cover all these things, because with there being a lot of similarities between different species, there's also some fine-tuned things that might be specific to that species that you might provide. Obviously, like water monitors need water, so ways to heat that water, ways to change that water, ways to filter the water, all these things, or different ideas that people have thought of to help accomplish something for their animal, what they're keeping. We want all these things in there so that you can get on here, we can share them, we can promote more ideas or make things easier on other keepers. So don't be afraid to hit us up with some of this stuff, and we'll try to get a good mix of people on here. um, it's funny, some of these long-term keepers, stuff they do uh, seems so simple, and they're like, yeah, this used to be common practice back in the day, and we lost touch with what was common practice.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So
some of it, yeah, we're all chasing this little piece of Australia to set up in our cages, and sometimes it's just not functional, or sometimes people want to keep an Aki with a waterfall and live plants, and it's not necessarily the best for this animal. They're
right.
not from the middle of the jungle. um so I guess I'm going way too far with this, but um help me out here, Kai. I'm Guy's looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. You just went on your own.
Yeah, it's a there's some of the species are quite specific, but okay, let's just, for example, tree monitors. Okay, although they spend majority of their time in the trees, right? Um, and I think most design like tree pythons or arboreal stuff.
Right.
Really, it's a little bit of bedding at the bottom and water dish or something like that. and then most of the elaborateness is in the top. The background or the amount of trees or tubing or branches or whatever that's decked out. Now that's not really necessarily bad for tree monitors, but there's more to the whole setup than just that, right?
Yeah, right.
And so when you think about it, the tree belongs to a root system. The root system belongs to a bunch of soil. All of this adds to the enclosure and should add to your environment to help with the balance. A game changer for me was when Jody Piper taught me how to utilize bottom or lower level heating, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's subfloor heating or you're adding heat pads down there to heat soil, or you have heat lamps set lower, or your enclosures are designed this way. Um, they basically heated the soil for me rather than me having to pump a ton of heat into the enclosure from the top, right? Which, with science, it's not really how heat moves and travels. Heat rises upwards. So you're using a lot of wattage to just heat this whole enclosure, making it possibly too hot. Now, rather than making an enclosure extremely hot, and then still barely when an enclosure is 8 foot for a tree monitor, a lamp up top is still barely doing anything to the
Right.
bottom at all.
Right.
So, in some of our enclosures that are much higher than 4 or 5 foot, like some of ours are, what you're doing is trying to warm this moist soil up, and this creates very dense humidity without you having to do a whole lot of spraying regularly.
Right.
Um, no, that's where I say again, where people are missing this aspect a lot. And when they're thinking about this enclosure, they totally disregard soil and everything is, the rock wall and the branches, which is important as well. It's just for like what I was using as an example, the tree monitor, you guys may be totally missing the other part of the enclosure.
Yep.
That can also be a nesting area, or there's very many pros to having heated soil, and so it's something to think about if you are, you know, planning to get into these types of animals. And it can be same thing with the Yakis too. You're not just thinking about a little bit of soil and having a bunch of nice elaborate rock wall. Okay, you're gonna have the rock wall and deep soil. That's a complete setup. So it's, yeah. Some of these enclosures, some of them don't make sense to me. That's where.
And it could be a few changes, guys, and honestly, probably lessons we've already learned. Some of them I have to revisit because I set something up, and maybe it's a new design or maybe it's a new thing, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? And I'll bounce it off of Khai. He's like, oh, this. I'm like, oh yeah, that was dumb. Um, so you're not alone in this. We're still very capable, or we'll come up with this great idea that just doesn't work for anything. back to back to what does work. Um, oh, and real quick before we go, I was supposed to take um, the black trees in today, and so if you guys have been listening or following, unfortunately that didn't happen because I'm here on my back. Now, if they were really hurting, of course, I'd be over there. So what has happened is the really swollen arm on the one, the swelling has gone down a lot, and the animal's fingers on that arm, where they were just staying kind of like limp and to the side, weren't really grabbing onto anything. Um, it will now grab onto my finger. It's still real light, but I can see the actual movement in the hand. So that's a big improvement. And the other one, the male that I took in that had some other protozoas or something going on, treated those and definitely gaining more weight. So things are looking real good on those. I'm a little upset because now I'll have to reschedule the appointment. Um, Life happens, I hate to say it. I wish I could. Uh, it wasn't necessarily a close place. I was going to
You should have went there in a wheelchair.
Man, if I could even get into that position, it's like it's that car ride I was dreading, being stuck there.
In a few
Um,
years, we're eligible for a cane.
yeah, no kidding, no kidding. Uh, you know,
Well, I
I
kind of
should.
want one.
It was it was UC Davis, so I was thinking, maybe I could call myself an ambulance, take my animals with me, have them lay me on a stretcher and roll me in, and just get up and hobble in with my animals.
Meh.
But so I'll have to reschedule that. But that's the update on those guys. So big improvement to their health overall, and
That's
I,
good, man. It's
yeah,
really good.
everybody else is doing good. I really think I'll get some. I'm hoping, but I think I'll get some eggs. I gotta imagine all this food is going somewhere with these tree monitors. It has to be doing something. Everything
Yeah,
else to me seems right. So I'm
totally
hoping.
different season too. So
Yeah,
hopefully something triggers and change. We're should be due for some more wetness before spring really kicks off. So hopefully we get that. Um, it was supposed to have drizzled today, but I
it
don't
did
know if that
here.
really we did.
Yeah,
That's good. Well, yeah, see, that's the wetness I was kind of talking about. There should be some more coming. So
yeah, we need it as a state. We need it too. But yeah, so I'm not going to get my hopes up too high because they are still new animals that came from a totally different area of the world on a totally different seasonal rotation. But at the same time, I'm just thinking, okay, they're doing something. The food, I put the food in, the food disappears. Um, it's got to go to something. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
yeah, cool,
All
man.
right, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening again. We're brought to you as one of the podcasts under the Morelia Python Radio Network. Go on to Morelia Python Radio .com. You'll see their website. You'll see all the podcasts that are there that are under the umbrella. If you have any questions about our show, you can always reach out to us or the other shows. You can always contact, I think it's info at moreliapythonradio.com to send an email to Eric for anything. Also, go on their website, check out their store, check out what they're doing. There's a lot of good information on there. If you're into other animals or you just want something to listen to, some fun podcasts while you're doing your workday, there's some great information and great people in there, real charismatic people. So they're just fun to listen to be honest. The other thing that you can also find us, of course, on social media, but I'll touch on NPR Network online. You can find them on both Facebook and Instagram. Let me make sure I'm getting that right, that it's NPR Network. I believe it is, but Kai, where can people find you?
They can find me mostly on Facebook and Instagram. Um, you can search up Kai Fan. On Instagram, I am big underscore lizard 103. And on YouTube, I am Mangrove Mecca. That's Mangrove and then Mecca Mecca. I'm most responsive on Facebook,
Right.
but I'll check my Instagram quite often as well. And I also respond there as well. What about you, man?
So you can find me on Instagram at origins_reptile and on Facebook at origins reptile. I'm responsive pretty much on anything, so hit me up wherever's comfortable for you, and I should be able to get back to you. But for the NPR stuff that I want to give people, it's actually NPR_network is where you can find them on Instagram and NPR on Facebook, and that'll take you there. Also, guys, if you're not a USARC member, we haven't said this in the last couple episodes, but look into USARC, look into what they do. Basically, they protect us and protect our hobby. They're at the forefront of getting some of these things that come up in these bills that are tucked away on, page 3,000 and something. That might be just be a paragraph, but could affect our hobby greatly. They're reading through these documents. They're fighting to basically allow us to work with to keep the animals we love. So if you're not a member, I highly encourage you to go join, even as a $5 setup, whatnot. I think that's the basic membership, and the reason is who else is? That's a good question. Who else is out there doing what U.S. Art can do for us, or is doing for us, or has the history that they have? They've been around longer than some of us have been keeping. So they got a good track record. I encourage you to go find out that information, help support them, because I'm not sure what the status of this new bill is, but um, I can't even remember off the top of my head what the bill's called. Do you remember? I'm putting you on the spot here.
We're talking about
Yeah.
like the Lacey Act.
Well, it's basically it's built into that
Oh,
bill.
oh man, I forget. The word is on the tip of my tongue. But man, no, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay. We'll get some better information for you out next episode. But
Yeah.
it's there where basically it wants to restrict animals to kind of their state, so you wouldn't be able to get animals from across state lines or sell your animals across state lines. And it restricts a lot of other species. It also allows the federal government to basically pick a species they don't like and say you can't keep them anymore. So if you don't want that to happen, or you're, um, wanting something to keep in the future, get on with US Art. Spend the $5. It's a coffee. It's something you might rent on TV. It's not much, and it can do a lot of good for us. So okay, I think we'll end there now that I'm rambling and rambling.
Yeah. Last thing is happy birthday, Eric.
Oh yeah, it's Eric's birthday.
The Podfather's birthday today.
Yeah, so it's Saturday, March 19th. So it's a very special holy day today.
All right, you guys, have a good one.
All right, see you later.